welcome once again to Halloween Movie Madness Part 2. It is the late night double feature picture show for all of you. And tonight we are featuring the movie Se7en, starring Morgan Freeman, Brad Pitt, Gwyneth Paltrow, among others. But before we get to the movie and start talking about it, I have to introduce my co-host and a very special guest. So let me introduce first. He is with Omen Comics, also Revelation Comics. He's part of the Omen Revelations podcast. He's also a writer for Rain Cross Press on Blood World. He's my very good friend and a podcaster that I am with on a number of different podcasts. I'm talking about none other than Steve John Doe Shade Wing Sellers. How you doing, Steve?
Well, I find it interesting that at this time that we're recording, it is 7 o'clock. So that means we are doing 7 at 7. Yeah, this is one. I will say this is one of those movies that I hadn't seen in quite a few years. But it is one of those movies that it is nice to go back to because I had forgotten most of it. I remembered the twist. I didn't remember a whole lot else. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to go and discuss it and see how well it holds up.
Definitely. This is one of those movies. I mean, it's been very influential on me, but I flush it out of my brain every now, after a couple of years because it is that disturbing, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But before we do that, I do want to give a shout out to Lance. He is out doing Warehouse 9 things, being very busy, making films, being a very important filmmaker and doing some very important stuff. So we miss him, but we'll look forward to when he will be able to join us again with his beautiful head of hair. We could have actually put up a picture of Dr. Frankenfurter with that head of hair. That's what we're looking forward to. We're going to get Lance in a Dr. Frankenfurter costume for Halloween. We will do it one of these years, folks, I guarantee. But until then, next, I have to introduce Mr. Claude Rains himself as the not so invisible man, Jeff Spacey. How you doing, Jeff?
7 is not your lucky number in this film. No. Oh, yeah. Got to give that shout out to Lance as well. We miss him. We love him. Always looking forward to getting his unique perspective on film as somebody who regularly makes films. So we will have to soldier on without him. But Nim, you're about to introduce our next contestant on The Price is Right, who we are very excited to have here today.
Yes, he is the owner of Omen Comics, Revelation Comics. He is on the Omen Revelation podcast. He has a new horror-themed podcast that I want him to introduce to all of you as well. He is also a writer for Rain Cross Press. He sends a theme here. And for Blood World, I'm talking. He's also the voice of Bjorn in the Fellowship of the D20, the death metal barbarian.
I can't do that crap.
I'm talking about none other than the big man, Michael Nunnally. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. I'm really excited to be on here. I mean, you guys had me at hello when you were talking about we're going to do horror this month. So I'm really excited to get into this.
Hey, and what is that horror-themed podcast that you have just started?
I just started with my friend James Caldwell called Countless Corpses Podcast. And it's kind of infotainment type of thing where we talk about some behind the scenes and backstage stuff. And we also throw our own little 2 cents into the whole thing.
That's awesome. And you guys are doing that year round, right?
Yes. Yeah. We're just doing a one episode per month because that's about all my schedule will allow. But that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Hey, go check that out, everybody. Countless Corpses podcast. I'll make sure we get links to their social in the YouTube description down below, and we will share that on Cinema Crusaders social as well. So go check that out. Nice. Because I know if you are listening to Halloween Movie Madness, you are definitely a horror fan. And Mike loves his horror movies. I know that. So you got to go check that out.
I would like to announce that I'm going to be stealing Mike's thunder with my own podcast called Boundless Bodies.
I think that's a whole
the bodies at the floor.
Yeah, I think that may be a whole different type of broadcast suitable for some of our more mature viewers.
What is my body count? You have to figure out what I mean by that.
Yeah, and that's not the place I was going.
Support find out. This is where this is going.
I was thinking more of the Blank's Gone Wild type of podcast, but okay, so anyway, first of all, I just have to ask this question. This is a quick lightning round, go around. If you were Detective David Mills, would you have committed the Wrath murder? And I'm going to go first. I'll say 80-20. Yeah, I'm probably pulling that trigger. So, Morgan Freeman has got a very soothing voice, but I don't think he'd be able to talk me down. So that's my quick answer on that one. Shadewig, what about you? Where are you? Are you Mr. Wrath, or are you letting justice take its course there?
I'm saying no, and the only reason, honestly, is because that was exactly what he wanted. Like, okay, so it's like, if you know that this guy wants you to kill him, he wants death by cop. He doesn't want to be judged by the system. The worst thing you could do to him is let the system judge him.
Yeah, well,
he clearly doesn't. He knows he's not going to make it. I mean, he provided his own death warrant on that one. He's cooked. Let him go to jail. Let him go on death row for what he did, and I'm sure he would be facing multiple potential death penalty counts for this. I mean, come on, no, I'm not going to be his pawn. No.
I'm afraid me and my Latino heat would be in a very giving mood that day. So
I fully understand the emotional. I fully understand the impulse. And I can be sympathetic towards that. I'm just like, technically, no, that's not the smart thing to do. And unfortunately, Mills has always been a very impulsive, heated dude.
Absolutely. And we will get into this in just a moment. I'm not saying that's, my answer is the right answer. I'm just being honest with all of you out there. But Jeff, what about you? Just quick lightning round. Are you Mr. Wrath at the end, or are you letting justice take its course?
Oh, I am Mr. Wrath, but my wrath is not playing his game. I would lean right into his face and just let him know that you fail, you're irrelevant, and you and I both lose. Because that's the only way I'm going to get anything out of it. Nothing else matters at that point.
All right. And what about you, Mike? How are you going?
I got to be honest. I think I'm more in Mills' shoes with that one. I'd have been fine with going, okay, you can walk. Before I found out my wife's head was in the box and she was carrying my child. Yeah. Well, once he found out she was carrying his child, that's when he crossed the line. That's when he said, you know what? Screw this. I'm killing him. And that would have been my line too. As soon as I found that out, okay, you're dying. I don't care if we both win. How's that?
You certainly can't condemn anybody who did pull the trigger on him.
Yeah. Morgan Freeman's voice would have had to gone into like full on God mode.
If only Freeman had started talking about penguins, he might have been able to talk him down.
Yeah, exactly. But like, you need to
Mills, did you know that the emperor penguin walks 33 miles in a swaying pattern?
Yeah, then I would.
That's really interesting.
That's okay because Morgan Freeman knows how to gut on the inside. He knows all about jail. You can get him out.
I mean, I love that scene because you can see on Freeman's face as soon as he mentions the kid, like Morgan knows it's over.
Yeah.
Plus, he knows it's done.
Plus, I mean, let's be perfectly honest here, and we'll get to the plot of the movie for all of you who haven't seen it in just a moment. But really, if we're being honest, what jury is going to convict that guy?
Nobody.
So
that's a temporary insanity case if I ever saw one.
Yeah,
at best, like
on top of that, he's a cop, and cops tend to get a lot of, shall we say,
accidental discharge.
They're not treated with the same amount of suspicion.
John Doe went for the gun 7 times.
Yeah, I mean he'll never be a cop again. But at that point, I mean, I don't think he really wants to be a cop again. So
I was telling my wife, she caught the tail end of the film with me. She'd already seen it. It's like, the end of that movie, that guy, he's dead either way.
I love that. He went for
the gun. They're all like, give him whatever he needs. Like what he needs is a gun and a bullet or a piece of rope or a ledge. He's not surviving this.
Yeah, it's like that Charlie Murphy line from the Dave Chappelle show. It's like, John Doe needed some help. It's like, we just gave him some help. So all right. So plot of the movie. I don't want to spend too much time rehashing the plot. because I really want to get into the acting performances. I want to get into the themes of the movie. Suffice it to say that this movie was very well written, and I do want to get into the writing as a subject. But the plot of the movie is fairly straightforward in that Morgan Freeman is the world-weary detective who has been on the job in the big city for a long time. And the man has seen it all, and he's ready to just be done with it because he has gotten to the point where he sees society, I'm going to say almost as irredeemable, but I think that is something that we could probably talk about. And then along comes the brash young detective played by Brad Pitt, named David Mills. And Brad Pitt's character thinks he has all the answers, and he's going to be the champion detective rushing in to save the day. And I think that he has a brashness, a naivete, and a hero complex, which is a dangerous mix in this city. And he's unwilling, especially at first, to listen to the wise advice of the old hand who has been there, seen it, and done it. So we open up on a murder, the first of the murders. And there are 7 murders in the movie that are based on the 7 deadly sins. And the first one is gluttony. The second one is greed. The third is lust. The fourth is pride. Is the fourth pride?
You're forgetting sloth was in there before.
Oh, yeah.
Sloth was before lust.
Yes. Yeah. Great. Oh, you're right. Gluttony, greed, sloth, lust, pride. Then the last 2, and that's a twist, and I'm gonna leave that for when we're talking about writing and stuff. But the last 2 were envy and wrath. And these murders are done by this man named John D. And the big twist, the plot reveal, what they hid in the movie from everybody until the very end, and they did a very good job keeping it a secret, from what I understand when the movie came out, was that Kevin Spacey plays John Doe, who is a serial killer who thinks that he is doing the Lord's work on these people. And I think that when we get into writing, I'd love to explore John Doe's headspace a little bit as well, because he is a sicko. But like all good villains, I think that he thinks that he's doing the Lord's work. He's not, but he thinks he is. So, and I think that's what makes a good villain a lot of times in writing, is when you write a villain who thinks that he is right. Or doing a good thing. So these murders take place, and as they continue investigating the murders, they eventually catch on to the fact that these are the 7 deadly sins. And Morgan Freeman is helping Brad Pitt do this research and talk through these things and see what Brad Pitt is missing in these murder scenes. And eventually they catch John Doe, but not in any way that through their detective skills. John Doe turns himself in. And ends up, offering to lead them to the last 2 bodies. And that will lead to the great twist of the movie, in which the murders for envy and wrath come about. And then the movie ends on Morgan Freeman, who is absolutely wonderful in this film. And we will talk about him when we get to the acting in this film.
Yeah,
but
the whole cast, really.
Yeah, actually, and there's some great supporting roles. I mean, there is one guy in particular that I want to talk about when we talk about acting in this movie. It was a very minor role, but I think he did amazing. But we'll get there in just a second. So let's get to writing and the story itself, how the story is put together. And I'm going to go around the horn here, and let's feel free to have a round robin discussion. But each of you bring up what a kind of topic you'd like to talk about, that thinking more along the lines of, what did you think of the villain? What did you think of the writing itself, the setup? This is one of those psychological detective thriller stories that I think it's just incredibly well written, well done, that kind of stuff. So let's look at it from that aspect. And I'm gonna go to if you want, Mike, otherwise I can go to Shadewing first. But if you are a guest, if you'd like to go first, you're more than welcome. Or we can go to Steve first.
No, I can do that. As far as the villain goes, I actually think that John Doe and Detective Somerset have something in common. Okay. And that is that they both feel that, they talk about how apathy is kind of reigning in that thing, and that not only is Somerset feels that he admits that he is guilty of apathy as well, and that is a solution to living in a bigger city. But I believe that John, in the case of John Doe, he believes that too much has been a blind eye has been turned to too much, and that too much has fallen to the wayside, and that something now needs to be done about that. And I believe that Somerset has that same conviction, but he doesn't come to it until the end of the movie.
Interesting. Now, here's a question for all of you then. Based on what Mike just said, what is John Doe's fatal flaw when it comes to his logic? And I think there's a couple different answers here. But, I don't think from a purely dogma standpoint, how he is interpreting sloth, greed, lust, envy, wrath, all of those things, all of those people, I'd say are definitely guilty of those, those sins from a Catholic standpoint, but that's not, except I think the one that he's very iffy on is lust, because they went past that quickly anyway, and that's a whole, she was an object of lust, but let's put that one aside for a second. What do you think John Doe's fatal flaw is? I'll go to Jeff first real quick on that one.
All right. I have to agree with you. The woman is the enabler of lust. She is not the one who suffers the condition of lust. So already his logic is flawed there. But as we were watching him go on about like why he's chosen each of these victims, there's one thing that stood out to me immediately, and my wife said the exact same thing. We're talking about like his reason that nobody in this society is pure and innocent and all that, and yet he chooses to envy the life of Detective Mills because he and his wife have come from outside of a large city. They're from places like, oh God, I thought we were getting away from tractor pulls and things like that. So you feel like they're a bit more suburban. They're definitely not like megalopolis sort of urban. And I think he chose her because he sees a purity in her. And then also, of course, the purity within her. She is really the innocent character in all of this. So his murdering of her has no justification. I don't know how else he would have portrayed his envy, but he is already flawed in his premise. And so no matter what he thinks of himself, that act alone makes him a villain.
I absolutely agree with that. I don't think I can say it's a flaw in the writing, but it's a flaw in
a flaw in his character, which might have been intentional in the writing. I don't think they wanted to write this guy to where people admire what he did. So I think he had to make some flaws within his own logic, which again you pointed out with the lust angle, and here with
and he murdered an innocent baby.
Yeah,
on top
and
of
like
that.
nothing's more innocent than a baby that hasn't even been exposed to the world yet. So,
and for all we know, he murders an innocent woman as well. Going to Paltrow. I mean,
and Paltrow is framed almost angelically throughout the film. So I think that's also a purposeful device here. When we have all this other religious allegory within the film.
I think that John Doe believed that one murder with Tracy was actually his one murder. He didn't. I don't believe that he thought that the other people were actually crimes, and necessarily that his envy caused him to commit that murder, and that's what made his sin.
Absolutely, I think you're absolutely right on that one. I think the thing is, that
I do believe he sees that as a murder, but like when he's going through and he's basically preaching to the two officers, he does not include her. And it could be to not spoil the surprise, but I also find that to be somewhat hypocritical as well. If you think you are so in the right that a murder is justified, if you're going to go biblical to the point where okay, God was justified in destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, then you as this agent of your faith, you should be able to justify this action, but he won't.
I would like to add that I think that the envy there was not just Detective Mills' life, that it was actually his ability to see. I think that John Doe had was envious of their ability to just kind of close off the rest of the world. They don't have to have this burden of all this darkness and all this sin around them. It doesn't have to affect him so clearly. And I think that is actually what he was envious of.
Oh, I like that angle.
That and also their ability to legally dispatch evildoers. They have the power of the law that they can do with that, and he doesn't have that. So
I kind of wish he'd put it that way, because he frames it in the life of John, or in the life of Mills, by saying, like, I tried to play daddy, it didn't work out, and all of this is clearly provocation to get Mills to do what he wants him to do. But I kind of wish he'd espouse that as well. But that's a good catch, Mike, because like like him and Freeman, him and Somerset are steeped in the corruption of this world. And Mills has this safe haven to return to because his wife is outside of all of it.
Yeah.
Bam.
I will also say that I think for me, and I'm going to go Steve in just a second, I think John Doe's other fatal flaw is that in several of the cases besides lust, he manufactures sins.
Yeah.
Most notably besides the lust one, I don't even think that was really the sin was there. Was the sloth one. I struggle to see how that guy, because he tied him to the bed and made him be inactive there for that whole time and tortured the man, and
he made a glutton eat until he couldn't.
Right.
Really,
but I think
that guy's sin was
what Nem is
pederasty.
saying there, though, is that with the sloth guy, he wasn't actually guilty of the sin of sloth. He was forced to be in that bed, I think is what Nem is saying.
Yeah.
No,
he basically entraps people into doing these things, and then he kills them.
I mean, because he literally says, like, he was guilty of sloth and he was a pederast. Like, well, that was actually his major sin.
Yeah. I mean, with the model with pride, and with the defense lawyer with greed, and if you read into it, I mean, if you make a assumption on behalf of the gluttonous guy, you could sort of assume those, but really he's not getting all of the sins. He is a murderer, whether he wants to admit it, just a cold-blooded murderer.
He enjoys what he does, and he manufactures a justification for what he does, but he's really.
Did we lose him?
I think we lost you there, Steve. I think there's something to this. Consider this. I don't think that John Doe had everything planned out as much as the movie kind of implies. In fact, I don't think he knew how to end his series of murders until he went up the stairs that day and he started taking pictures of Mills and Somerset, and Mills just went off on him. MILLS, fuck off, right? Yeah. And he got all kinds of pissed at him and blew up. And then we see Mills throughout the movie blowing up. I think that right there is when he decided, okay, I know how I'm going to end this now.
Well, not only that,
Mills is the only one who actually gets to trigger him when they're taking the ride. He's always calm, cool, and collected, and Mills actually gets under his skin by saying, "You're killing innocent people." And they're like, no, I'm not. And he goes off in his rant.
Well, and the first the first 3 murders seem to be very meticulously executed and plotted, but once they end up at his doorstep and he is forced to accelerate, you could almost see that he is devolving. That lust murder, this seems spur. I mean, and that was horrible. And I do have to say, thank goodness that they didn't show us any specifics on that one.
You have to imagine, like, if his plan was still on track, all of these things would have taken a significant amount of time, as the first few murders did. Because he's, as William says, like, these are meticulous, well planned. They take time. Like, this guy takes a lot of time. He goes to the grocery store and back. He knows he's got everything he needs in place. He's super smart in that way. And worst of all, he's patient.
And so I think Mike's point is absolutely right there. I think
Steve, are you back? I thought I heard Steve.
Yep.
No.
There he is. I think envy and wrath were set piece things that he came up with on the the spur of the moment. So
no, just wanted to give you your shot, Steve, because you went out on us.
yeah. So,
yeah, no problem. Yeah, I mean the whole thing. There's one point like where with the sloth guy, he took a year to do this, but we start seeing that his patience is being tested, and ultimately, he can't maintain it. With the cops actively after him. So he starts improvising more and more, and yeah, he starts evolving at that point. I agree.
Yeah, and from a psychological standpoint, even the most meticulous serial killers, if you look at people like Bundy, for instance, even as smart as that guy was, escalation happens. It's like taking drugs. After a while, you just need more and more and more to get what you need out of the crime. So he was bound to self-destruct eventually.
That's a great segue. I'm going to go to Steve first on this one. Steve, what did you think of the writing from let's approach it first from the criminal aspect. So the writing of the crimes, I think it takes a great deal of skill and research. Having a book that's coming out that has some of this in it, and I'm not going to put myself on this level at all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it takes a lot of skill, research, and sick, maybe twisted imagination to come up with crimes and crime scenes and everything like that. What did you think of the writing from the criminal aspect on this? I'm going to go around the horn with everybody on this.
From what I could tell, it seemed like it was pretty reasonable in the way that they set things up. There's definitely an element of the retributive justice aspect. They clearly did their homework when it came to researching the sins. All these different books that they were taking from the Divine Comedy, Francis of Assisi, Paradise Lost, all these sorts of really classic, texts. And they drew on that and with the idea that the criminal's using them as an inspiration for his own crimes. I thought that was really well done. And then thinking about, okay, how do you inflict a crime like this using those themes in the modern day without getting caught, in 1990s New York? I feel like by and large, like a lot of them were really, really clever. Gluttony was pretty sick, but it felt like that was a good place to start with, and then you start building up to the other ones, and you start seeing how they're all a little bit different.
I have to laugh because they go from like a place that seems to be as obvious as New York or Chicago or something straight into the desert, and it's right out. It's like a 25-minute drive from my house. I know exactly where it is. They filmed that last scene with the head, so
it does not look like New England in any way. It does not look like what upstate New York would look like. I don't buy that at all. But I mean, in terms of like what's going on in the city itself,
But it was a great setting for the end piece.
Yeah. Jeff, what did you think of the way they set up the crime scenes and the way the crimes were done? The actual physical crimes and everything. Was it believable to you? Was it plausible?
Well, let's see. My wife and I, we do enjoy, I don't know if she always did. It started with me because being into psychology, I enjoy watching these serial killer shows, trying to see how people work.
I know Mike likes that stuff too. So
yeah, and then that leads us to getting into shows like Dr. G and Forensic Files, and hell, I grew up watching Quincy with my mom, so like the CSI before CSI way back in the day. So that sort of stuff always fascinates me. And the crime scenes I thought were staged really well. I do have like some caveats with some of the methodology. I think cutting off your fingertips, for instance, to remove your fingerprints is pretty ridiculous. Just wear thick gloves, man. Just wear leather gloves.
Well, not only that, they can identify you from, even back then they could identify you from palm prints and stuff. But
yeah,
that was nowadays it really wouldn't work because they have DNA.
Yeah,
and you would think that by then they would have DNA technology. Yeah, run the DNA.
Yeah, I mean DNA was starting to come out at the tail end of the '80s, so there's that, and it was just for like the kind of the cool gross out factor. But if this guy was so smart, he would just wear gloves. A more clever application of this I actually saw on CSI, where they had an FX artist make a hand, and they would have fingerprints. You'd spray a little canola oil on there because we have oil in our skin, and they only figured it out because they would find particles of latex in the fingerprint, and they started to figure that out, microparticles.
Yeah, I remember that. The guy's a judge. Yeah, that was a great. It was like a two-parter. So
yeah, because that guy came back as a recurring villain. That was a real mastermind there as well. So some of the staging is clearly just for the benefit of the movie, but the stuff that worked, I thought worked pretty well. I've out of the crime scene photos that I've seen on various shows and the way they've staged them, and I'm not talking about like TV shows. I'm talking about like these actual forensic file show where they show you these edited versions of the crime scene, just trying to cover up the worst of it, or watching the court case files like I used to. It's a dressed up version of that, but it looked pretty accurate in some of the stuff I've seen. Especially some particularly gruesome crimes. If you look at the one murder scene where Jack the Ripper was able to catch a woman in her flat, and he had all the time he needed with her. That's a horrific sight. There's just blood everywhere, and you could tell he had the time to do whatever he wanted to do. And some of the scenes kind of reminded me of that. It was like not the kind of a gross out thing you get with a Saw, but this. I think Fincher did his best to ground this in as much reality as he could, while still dressing it up for that visual punch that Hollywood requires, for the atmosphere and the shock value and the horror.
I'm going to get back to that in just a second, but first I want to go to Mike. What did you think of the actual crimes themselves, how the writer conceived them and how they were executed on film?
I personally thought they were brilliant. I mean, if you're going to take someone's sin and turn them against them, I mean, I really thought he fit that really well. Each sin, each kill had something to do with the sin he was punishing them for. And I thought that was absolutely perfect. And honestly, I've done a lot of studying on serial killers, and if they're going to preach, it is going to be in their kills that they're going to do it in. So I really thought that fit nicely.
Absolutely. I will say that I think that the best executed one was the first one, and I think that he had to establish the detective story bona fides for the movie there, and so we got the most detail as far as investigation and looking at the crime scene and the the post-op or the post-mortem examination and all of that. I would have loved to have seen that of several of the crimes, but I don't think we had enough time in the movie, So I think that's why it went that way. Quick lightning question around the horn, though. Of all of the, let's leave Envy and Wrath out of it. Of the 5 other ones, which one do you think was the most? God, I hate to say this because I don't want to sound fanboy about horrible murders, but the best,
the most horrifying, or
the most horrifying and the most well written, well conceived crime for that sin. And I'll go first. And to me, the one that really got me as far as it being a clever bit of torture for the particular sin that he was trying to emphasize was the Pride one, where he had glued the sleeping pills and the phone to a model's hands off her nose, and they given her a choice. You can either call for help and survive, or take the bottle of pills and die.
Really, that one made his point more than any other case.
Yeah. So I thought, that's definitely not the most graphic one when you get to it. It's not the most gruesome one. It was probably the easiest way to die, to be perfectly honest with you. Although she had to go through some horrible pain getting her nose cut off, obviously. But compared to some of the other ones, that's how bad some of these murders were, folks. I think, but I think it made the point, and it was very, from a writing standpoint, I think it was brilliant, brilliant in its concept. So, same question, Mike. What did you think for you?
Well, I suppose the one I really liked was actually Greed. That he had to cut off a pound of flesh from himself and then put that on the scale. That was so apropos with the books that he was referencing and everything. And I really appreciate that from a horror aspect too. Having to cut off like imagine cutting off your love handles and having to put that on a scale. I mean, damn.
And not only that, one of the things, I mean, don't get me wrong, this movie is gory, and there are things that are really hard to look at in this movie. But compared to what they could have showed us, this movie is tame. So
I actually think that one of the more brilliant things about Seven is actually what they don't show you. They show you just enough information to let your own freaking twisted nightmares play out what happens in your mind.
Exactly.
In the what do you call it? The commentary. I was watching over Seven. Fincher talked about how somebody actually, a woman came up to him. Just totally berating him about I don't know how you were raised, but you're all messed up and everything. And she was talking about how she remembers watching John Doe cut off Tracy's head. And he was like, I don't know what to tell you, lady. That's not in the movie. But it goes to show you the power of the theater of the mind that she remembered that happening, even though it's not even in the film.
I mean, it's what we see. We keep seeing the aftermath. We never see the crimes. And this kind of harkens back to something like Carpenter's Halloween, which only has 3 deaths or so in it and never anything bloody. But 5, okay. But people keep thinking this is the most goriest slasher they've ever seen. It's no, it's all implied.
Well, and to prove that point once again, when you brought up the Greed murder, I could see that in my head. I could see the guy sweating through his chair and having to hold the knife and decide to cut himself.
Oh.
I could see all of it, but it was never on screen. So,
right, and part of that was not just the images we saw, but listening to Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman talk about it. About that sweat filling the chair, because Mills described that the chair was literally full of sweat, and he's you can picture that in your mind. What that must have been like, right?
And you know that usually the rule in when you're doing something visual, and movies are visual. Sure, they've got the auditory component, but it's it's like graphic novels and stuff. The main selling point is usually the visuals, but here it's not. Here it's a case of tell, don't show, and he knows when to break the rules. And when you've got a couple of actors of this caliber who can give you that exposition in a way that paints the picture for you, you don't need to see it.
But I think that this is something, and correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but I think this is something that is kind of unique to horror, and that oftentimes the things you don't show or don't explicitly show to your reader or your viewer are the things that scare them the most, because you let their own imagination.
And I think something like Psycho, which we're going to be discussing, is a great example of that too. This is definitely Hitchcockian, a little more gory, but it still uses the Hitchcockian techniques of implying just enough to make the theater of the mind do the rest and fill the blanks.
I liked with the lust kill, all they had to do was show that instrument they had strapped on him, and then listen to him, that guy describe it. That's all they had to do. You didn't actually have to see the woman's body or anything.
And see, that was my favorite kill because of that actor's performance, because he sold it. And I thought, what's more horrifying? Because this guy is left, and he was forced to commit this horrifying act with a gun jammed down his throat.
And I want to get.
I
want to get to the actor when we talked about acting performances. I will say, for me personally, right, and we'll get to Steve in just a second. When I first saw this movie, and I just saw the picture in the sex shop of that device, my first reaction, I said it out loud. I was like, "Oh, you sick fuck." I was just like,
mine was a good oh shit, because you know.
Yeah. I was ready to kill somebody. I mean, wrath was ready right there for me. So I was like, oh yeah. I mean, and it's not like the other stuff that had come before had been any better. It was bad. But then I saw that thing. I didn't need to see anything. I was also like, oh, you sick bastard. It's like, what?
I mean, because you're like, can you imagine, she, if she wasn't gagged, she was begging for her life, before the guy commits. Is like,
Mhm.
Actually, with how loud it was in that place, I don't think they had to have any type of sound muffling at all. I mean, they had to scream just to
And
hear
for
each
John
other.
Doe's
there.
point, he probably would want this guy to hear everything she
Yeah,
had
well,
to say.
and
while
hearing
he's
scream
down.
in a place, hearing screams in a place like that, they probably, he's getting off on it.
Yeah,
And then-
they're having a
Also-
great time in there.
And
I
not
would
only
like
that,
to point out that they don't say that guy was brought there by John Doe and then did that. That guy was already there.
yeah.
So I mean, maybe that's the lust aspect there too.
Well,
And
the part-
that's why I say like it was his sin, but like he was, instead of harming himself, John goes for the psychological harm on him because he knows this is going to mess him up forever.
Well, the other part that really got me was that, and I'm sorry, we kind of got away from Steve a second, but the other part that got me is the guy who built that device, how apathetic he was about the fact. He's like, I built worse than that. I was like, who the hell is going to your shop, man? What is going on there?
Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers.
It's like, I don't want you to die or anything, but John Doe should have paid you a visit, So it's like, God.
You've written worse, sir.
Yes, I know. Oh man. All right,
Maybe
Steve.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
man,
ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
I was just gonna say maybe he was John Kramer's apprentice.
Oh God. Probably.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, there is a bit of Jigsaw on him. Yeah, I would agree with that. This one is kind of tricky to answer because it's like some of them are really well done in very different ways. I mean, yeah, you've got the Pride one is really good. And I'll add that one. It's like the whole idea of cutting off your nose to spite your face, and then hitting them like in their biggest source of pride, which is their beauty. Oh my God, that was insidious. But in terms of like being methodical, I had to go with Sloth because this guy had it planned for up to including paying the guy's rent every month, so that he would just gradually waste away and nearly die. I mean, and by the time they find him, he's at a point where he's a living death. I mean, that is just disgusting. I mean, really, really absolutely nasty thing that they did to that guy. I mean, really, really well done. And nobody was even had a clue for the whole year that there was anything going on with this guy. It's like, oh yeah, he's just the greatest tenant we've ever had. Yeah, he just pays his rent on time. We never see him. There's no noise. He pays his rent on time, and he goes on his way. No, and the guy is just wasting away to death in the bed. I mean, just absolutely haunting.
And I will say, if you want a prima facie evidence for euthanasia, there's your man right there. Because he ended up living through all that. It's like,
a guy who's so hungry he chews off his own tongue to have something to eat.
Yeah.
Whew. All right. Yeah. So this is one of those happy feel good movies here. So
I would also like to comment that sloth kill was really the one super scary part of that movie when that cop leans over and says, "You got what you deserved," and the guy goes, and you're like, "Oh my God!"
I love it.
No, he really didn't.
I love that this poor bastard, even though he's a pederast, right? He's the victim here. And all the cops point their guns at the dead guy tied to the bed. It'd have been pretty funny if they all just shot the shit out of him.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to.
Right?
It probably would have been a mercy, to be honest with you.
It would have been a mercy. Like, oh,
absolutely,
God, how are you going to explain this? Yeah. Quick, somebody put your ankle gun on it in his hand.
Yeah, he reached for the gun 7 times too. So
that's right.
All right, so let's go quick the opposite way. I'm going to go, and I'll hit this one first, then I'm going to go to Mike, and we'll go around the horn the other way. Writing from the other side of the fence, from the detective side, for the investigation side. This is something, once again, I'm going to go back to, my book that I've got coming out that I really enjoy getting into. And I love watching true crime shows. I'll be perfectly honest. Se7en is another one of those things that was a big inspiration for me in writing my book. And I love the way that Morgan Freeman especially goes about his job as an investigator here. He's incredibly intelligent, incredibly insightful. I think Brad Pitt is basically his character from Fight Club with a badge, So, what is that guy?
Tyler Durden is much smarter than this.
Yeah, so I don't have a whole lot of good things to say about Brad Pitt's character. But Morgan Freeman is, I think, the detective. And after watching this movie, I almost wish that they had done a noir movie with Morgan Freeman with a voiceover. I would have been in love. So it would
He
have
did
been
get the
absolutely-
one little voiceover at the end of the movie.
Yes, that's true.
I feel like in many ways, Seven is a noir.
It
is a noir.
It's
I-
definitely
but-
noir.
Definitely.
I mean,
Noir horror.
I
But
would
it's
have
a
wanted
horrifying noir.
I would have wanted the whole thing. I mean, I've got jazz in it. I've got the city. I've got the rain. Give me the black and white and the voiceover for the whole movie, and I could be really, really happy for a long time.
You got to bring in the
Yeah, I get
jazz
it.
for like true noir.
Yeah. I mean, we did get some jazz, though. I mean, we had jazz in the movie. So, as much as I classify this movie as a psychological thriller, I think it's a crime movie, a crime detective
Very
drama
much
as
so.
well. So, Mike, what did you think from the law enforcement detective standpoint?
Honestly,
writing.
I thought the writing was brilliant, and I'll tell you why. In the movie, Brad Pitt's kind of coming onto the scene new, and like Morgan Freeman points out at the beginning, he may have been a detective in homicide for 5 years off, and whoever knows where he came from, but he hasn't been a detective here, and so really through the whole movie there, you kind of get to learn the whole detective angle, like how they're doing it, what their process is, what their method is, through Somerset teaching Mills the ropes of how it was all done. And I thought that was brilliant because that totally engages the reader. They're like, okay, I'm in Mills' shoes there. I'm learning this from Somerset too, and I'm putting these clues together. I just, writing wise, that really engages the reader, and I thought it was brilliant.
I'm going to go to Jeff in just a second, but I'm just going to throw this out there. You guys don't have to answer this question at all, but one of the things I find most interesting is that nowadays, when we talk about the insidious areas for crime in our detective stories and our detective movies and everything, it's almost always cities. Yet, if we think about the greatest detective in literature anyway, Sherlock Holmes, they were of the opinion that the places where the most insidious crimes could happen was out in the country, in the rural areas.
Sherlock does a lot of traveling in his series.
Yeah.
I got 2 words for you: Ed Gein. Out in the country.
Yeah.
Well, here's how we can look at it. Your urban environment, you are going to have a multiplication of crime, and some of it's nasty crime, because this is what happens if you stick millions of people on top of millions of people. But you come out here and you're like, being Southern, we kind of make this joke. You might have boys in the hood, but we got boys in the woods.
Yeah.
And you will just disappear on somebody's hog farm, and they will never find a trace of your remains. Like, you'll just go away, and people will wonder what happened. It
Unless,
is
of course, you're into
Fargo with the
analyzing
wood
pig
chipper.
All I'll say is I would rather walk down the street and hear somebody say, "Orale, vato," any day of the week than to be out in the woods and hear. So,
I live here, and that shit scares me. So, there you go. Like people, we've living here in Myrtle Beach. We've had people come down here, tourists come down here, who have vanished without a trace. Nobody knows what became of them. We have our suspicions, of course, but it happens. And when you get thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people coming down every year, and there's an opportunity for people who are predators to enact their will upon another, and it does happen. And so you have to be aware, even in a place that somebody thinks is like a vacation spot, it's very easy for somebody to just disappear. Even more so, I think, than in a city, because in a city, what are you going to do? You got to dump people in a dumpster, or take them to a landfill, or do the old mafia thing. Stuff them in an oil barrel in a car that's going to get crushed. Like, there's swamps, there's quicksand, there's the ocean you can dump people out in. And like I said, hogs will eat you to the bone. There is nothing left. Nothing left.
I watched Hannibal. So
yeah. So yeah, on to the point here of the writing standpoint. I want to approach it from the arc of the detectives. Brad Pitt, for my money, has the major arc. Morgan Freeman's arc comes in about halfway in and really finalizes. Brad Pitt's arc is on a downward trajectory from this first scene. And the writers established this right away that he's already a hothead. He wants the glitz, the glam, the excitement, the fame, perhaps. He genuinely wants to do things like, William makes a point going like, "Oh, you meant that when you say we're going to get the guy." And so he does. His heart is in the right place, but he's that cocky young guy. He's all gung ho. He's fired up, and so he's very impulsive. He's got low impulse control. As we see when he kicks in the door, and he just breaks procedure, even though knowing that might ruin the case. And I say that he is not going to survive past the end credits of the film, because everything he does in this film leads him to this end. He wants to be here. He fights to move here, even though his wife hates it, doesn't want to move here. He fights to be on this case, even though the captain and Freeman both tell him, like, you're not ready for this kind of case. Every step of the way, he dogs this, and he goes after John Doe. He gets in his face. He does everything he can, unwilling and unknowingly, to antagonize the killer. He catches the killer's eye because of who he is, how he has to charge off alone. He doesn't wait for the backup. He doesn't try and give his, you cut him off over here, I'm going this way. Do that typical kind of cop thing you see in the movies. He just goes it, and it nearly cost him his life. And so everything he did led him to this sorry end. And the inevitable end of this is he is going to kill himself. Yeah, go ahead.
I thought he was going to kill himself as well. It's interesting when you say all that is that it occurs to me that if we substituted Morgan Freeman for Al Pacino and
Pitt, you mentioned
Brad Pitt for Keanu Reeves, this could easily be the Devil's Advocate.
Yeah. And here's you talk about the hero cop things. You guys did, like Steve, I believe. He mentioned Serpico. He's already idolizing like the hero cop who will stand up, who will do what's right no matter what. He does think he's a superhero, and it costs him everything in the end, because he's not. He is living in a more real world than he's ever lived in before. And for Freeman's part, this guy who had seen too much and who was desperate to retire, he gets changed halfway through the film by meeting Mills's wife. And this is such a delicate piece of writing, how their relationship evolves him. When he sees her, much like Joe, like you said, he and Doe have a lot in common. He sees her as this purity, this safe haven, and especially finding out they're bringing a new, hopeful life into the world. And his end quote, he tells his captains, like, where are you going? So, like, I'll be around. He's not retiring. He's not taking the early retirement. And then he ends that quote saying, like, the earth is a wonderful place and it's worth fighting for. And he said, I agree with the second statement. Yeah. So everybody's life has been changed for the worse, if you think about it. I mean, it's nice that the people on the street are still going to have Detective Freeman out there as their advocate, as the guy pursuing justice, pursuing vengeance, justice, whatever's required for that victim to see things through. But it has, in effect, in a way, kind of ruined his life too, because now he's dragged back into the bloody mire that he was trying to escape. So no happy endings for anybody.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't even know that I agree that Somerset got it even close to happy ending, because I think Somerset's observation that the role of a detective in the big city is mostly about collecting things to be cataloged is pretty damn true.
His retiring and getting away from all that was going to be for him a happy ending, the happiest ending he could possibly have, because he's thrown away every other chance for a happy ending, as we find out. He threw away a chance to have, the Brad Pitt life, the family, the child, all that, because he's so jaded by that point. He thought that was absolutely the right thing to do, and still does. But now he's he doesn't get his quiet retirement. He doesn't get to live that life free of the burden of having to be the man on the wall that keeps them from us. It's a dreadful movie.
I can't help but wonder whether Freeman's decision, not to have a family, was because he kind of had a feeling that what happened to Mills would happen to him. That somebody would take advantage of his family to try to get at him.
Yeah, and like being married to a cop is statistically incredibly stressful. Like so many cop marriages, second marriage, third marriage, that kind of thing. It's a tough road to hoe.
I don't think I would want to raise
I-
a kid in a big city, but
I have to comment on the metronome.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I think that Somerset's arc is really about going from a place of apathy and not believing that there's even any point to continuing the fight to the end of it, realizing that there is something worth fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the real shifts in him at the real points where you can see him turn, at the beginning there, you see him turn on that metronome. And it's clicking back and forth. And over the background, you hear the horrid sounds of the city and people screaming and fighting and guns and all that kind of stuff. I think that the metronome was a way for him to somehow block out the horror and allow himself to sleep. And I think that it really says something later when he picks up the metronome and throws it into the other room. He can no longer be apathetic. He can no longer disconnect himself from that. He has to be a part of it now.
Interesting. I never read that much into it because I've lived in the city and I've used a metronome just because it's like white noise. It's like you need something to get rid of you got constant noise going on outside.
Yeah,
so.
I agree with Mike.
It's kind of like being Daredevil and trying to keep all the noises of the city out from being able to hear them.
Well, that's exactly my point, though. That
you're
he's
100%
using that
on it.
noise to keep him awake, to distract him from the city.
Yeah.
Because if he hears all that stuff in the city, he's either not going to sleep or he's going to have nightmares. He needs to shut it off.
Yeah. So, Steve, let's get to you real quick before we move on. The detective side. What did you think of the detective aspect of the writing and the movie?
Yeah, there are a couple of elements that come in to play. I think one was the noir element that we talked about. I really do feel in many ways that it's a noir. In addition to that, I kind of feel like if this was a different genre, this would be a buddy cop movie. And the reason that I say that is because you could very easily see Mills and Somerset as like Riggs and Murtaugh. They have the same kind of roles. Yeah, he
really is getting too old for this shit.
I'm about a week away from retirement. God damn it, I'm too old for this.
In any other movie, that would get you killed.
Yeah.
The guy who's like a few days from retirement dies.
But this movie subverts everything, including which detective is the one that ends up dying. It's not the old hand who is about to retire. No, he gets off. And he stays in the force, and he's perfectly fine, and going to his diners and his library, whatever. It is Mills, the hero cop, who ends up doing the wrong thing. The villain wins, and he is going off to a fate, and probably ends up having to shoot himself. It's a deconstruction of all those of all those classic things.
So you're saying that John Doe, the reason he committed all these crimes is because one time he got fucked in the drive-thru. Is that what you're saying?
Fuck you with the drive-thru.
It would not surprise me if that was part of it.
Damn drive-thrus. Look what they did.
Yeah. Evil, I tell you, evil.
I can't understand you.
And then
this has been.
I said no pickles.
This has been a great breakdown of the plot and the writing and everything. And I knew that this was going to take the majority of our time, but I do want I want us to touch on some acting performances. And I'm going to start with Mike and go around the hill. Try and hit, one person, and we'll kind of talk about a little bit, and we'll go around. So for you, Mike, if you could pick, and I'll let you go first, you're our guest. Pick one performance out of there and kind of highlight some of the stuff you like it. We can, if we have a little go around, we could do that as well. But from the acting performances in the film. So.
I think the one that really stood out to me was Brad Pitt's performance at the end there. That with the look on his face, you could see that going in him, he's thinking about it, maybe I shouldn't kill him. Maybe I shouldn't. And then he hears about her being pregnant, and you can see that switch in just with the look on his face. He doesn't say any words, and you can just see it right there. That was just powerful. I could not feel that.
Awesome. Now, one of the things that got me, I do want to hear your guys' take on this real quick. anybody chime in, is that watching Brad Pitt in this time frame, mid 90s, we got 3 movies to be, and it seems like all 3 of his performances movies are very similar. And I think it's because of the writing. I don't think it's because of Brad Pitt's acting, because I think he's a very good actor. But you have 12 Monkeys, Fight Club, and this movie. And all 3 characters have many of the same mannerisms. They're almost manic in the way they act and talk and speak and move and everything. And I find that very curious. I'm kind of curious what you guys think of that.
I guess I don't think I agree with that.
Okay.
I see them I see them as totally different characters. In 12 Monkeys, he's definitely more manic and crazy, but Tyler Durden is very controlled.
Yeah,
I'm in the same boat as Mike.
Okay.
For the same reasons.
So you're saying, Nim, shut up, go away. You don't know what you're talking about.
It's your perspective, man. Like I'd see that each of these characters has a lot of charisma, a lot of energy, but Tyler Durden is every bit as controlled as John Doe.
Huh. Yeah. Interesting. I see Tyler Durden. I guess I've seen some of the expanded footage.
He doesn't get manic till the end of the film.
Yeah, I guess that's the part that always stands out to me, and that one always overlaps directly into the character that I most strongly relate to Brad Pitt in this time frame, which is 12 Monkeys. Well, it's one of my favorite movies, and really, I can almost never see Brad Pitt without that. It's like later Brad Pitt I associate with World War Z a lot. Yeah, exactly. So I got the and that's a movie I would like to talk about sometime, because I think that movie, although it has nothing to do with the book, I don't think that's a bad movie. I don't like zombie movies, but I like World War Z. But that's a whole other thing. All right, Jeff, acting performance in the movie.
I'm not going to hit the big guys,
okay,
because we all know they're amazing. Gwyneth Paltrow, Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman. Even smaller players like Arlie Emery, he always turns out a good performance. A lot of people in small roles. I want to go back to The Victim of Lust, because that guy, for those few seconds he was on screen, sold the horror and the terror of that moment in a way that I think was more gratifying than if we'd seen the act. Because that guy sold it without having to actually perform the physical action. And it's riveting, and my heart went out to this guy who's faced with like either getting his head blown off or committing this grisly act. And when you see something like that, you can't help but go like, "What would I have done?" Like, God knows, could I don't imagine I could do it, but I've never had a gun shoved down my throat either. But like that guy, just like, man, like it's just like when you can move me like that as an audience member, it's like Mike talking about Pitt's performance at the end, because the anguish is so freaking real that your heart's in your throat. So I feel the same sort of emotions watching this guy.
Well, you stole mine, so I got to think of another one. That's number one. Number two, that actor's name is Leland Orser. I've seen him in a couple things. He was in Alien Resurrection, so not a very good movie, but good performance.
Okay.
At least in my opinion, not a very good movie. However,
can I just say the best line in the movie? This isn't even my desk.
Yeah.
What I will say, though, here's a cool piece of trivia about Leland Orser's performance and how committed he was to this bit part role. 4 days beforehand, he hyperventilated in order to build up his oxygen, his ability to hold oxygen, so that he could hyperventilate on camera and have it look convincing.
Wow.
And he did not sleep for 3 days before his performance, so he could look stressed out.
That's some serious method acting there. And like my opinion of method acting is it can be quite dangerous. There's a number of actors who have done themselves permanent physical injury and even death. If you look at I would argue for the case of Heath Ledger and Jeremy Brett, who played my favorite Sherlock Holmes ever, that they killed themselves doing the role.
Well, you get 1,000 points for liking Jeremy Brett's Sherlock Holmes.
Best Sherlock Holmes ever. Closest one to the books you'll ever see.
Absolutely. But yeah, I thought that was absolutely amazing. I mean, the fact that he didn't sleep for 3 days so he could have the look of a guy who was completely stressed out and on the edge. I was like, yeah, well, effect achieved. Good, good for you. Go get some sleep, buddy.
That's 30 seconds for an Oscar in my book.
Yeah,
Give it to him.
I thought it was really impressive, especially for, the guy's in the movie for what, 2 minutes tops, so absolutely amazing. Steve, acting role within the movie, what did you think?
Trying to talk about somebody that we really haven't talked too much about. I do want to mention Richard Roundtree as the Attorney General. I just think it's really, really awesome
That's
that
really
Shaft becomes Attorney General of New York City.
He's just cleaned up the streets, now he's going to clean up the courts.
Yeah. I mean, he's really, really strong in that role too. I mean, he definitely looks like somebody who's a public official, and he carries that role convincingly, and he has a lot of authority behind him, and that's really good. I will point out, Kevin Spacey as John Doe, though, I would say is like one of the major performances, which is impressive because he's really not in it that much. You'll see him like here and there. He's wearing the trench coat and the hat, and he's doing little things here and there. But we don't really see Spacey really hit the performance until the whole scene after he turns himself in, and then he's sitting in the back with Mills and Somerset, and he just looks absolutely creepy. And it's like I think I did say like off camera, it's like he plays all these horrible people because he is a horrible person. But there's something he's channeling into this character that really works.
Well, yeah. Number one, I will say, Steve
talk about method acting.
Steve stole my number two that I was going to talk about.
Now here's some connected tissue, Nim. Yeah, I find that his character here is actually kind of related to Kaiser Soze in the manipulation and the smooth, unaffected, placid delivery that he affects in both films.
I will also say about Kevin Spacey. I mean, we don't need to talk about his private life. I think most people know, about his deal with all of that. But the man is supremely talented in his craft. And while he is often plays absolutely horrible characters, from Andrew Card and House of Cards to, John Doe here, he has also played some incredibly sympathetic characters who come off very good. I'm thinking of, I think the character name was Casey in Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman.
Oh yeah,
that's totally what I was just thinking too.
Yeah, I mean that his performance in that movie is absolutely astounding, and when he dies,
good death scene
is incredible, and he just did an incredible job in that movie. So for whatever his personal faults are, and then I don't want to rehash those. We don't think we need to. I have to say that he is an incredible actor. I think
no question. This is one of his masterful performances, I think.
Everybody knows it's almost always more fun to play the bad guy anyway. The bad guys get to do the most fun stuff.
My horse, my kingdom for horse. Yes. So you guys hit a bunch of them. I am going to talk about, I was tempted to talk about Gwyneth Paltrow, but and I think she was good in this, and I think I don't know if this is one of her earlier films. But honestly, I don't know that I could talk about anybody else, since you guys took the other two, than Morgan Freeman. I mean, and you can never give enough props to Morgan Freeman. He's like James Earl Jones, and he's just a treasure. But
such a long way from Dracula and the Electric Company.
Yeah. But the thing is I honestly believe one of the things that I think makes Morgan Freeman, and this is just another example, whatever he does, I find utterly believable. I believe that he is an inmate. He is Red in the Shawshank Redemption. I believe that he is Detective Somerset in this movie. I believe that he could be a version of God in Bruce Almighty. I believe that he is these performances, and he always brings this quiet dignity to grace and elegance to his performances. He is, to go back to a much older age, he is our age's Sidney Poitier, so he is just that good, and he's a treasure.
Another gentleman.
Yeah, and this an absolutely incredible actor, and I think years from now, when we are very old and gray, much grayer than we are now, we will have been blessed to have been able to see him when he was alive. So
there's this little interview he gave. He was talking about a movie he did with Christopher Reeves. I can't remember the name of it, where he's a pimp, and Reeves is wanting to do this kind of like journalistic story on it, and he gets way in over his head. And he talked about getting the role. There's a scene where he puts a hooker up against the wall, and he's threatening to cut out one of her eyes. And he's like, choose. And he said all the other actors are coming in there screaming like, choose, bitch, which eye is it going to be? And you talk about that quiet dignity. He played this up in a scary way, and he got up there and he holds the knife up to the woman's face like, all right, I want you to pick one. It's going to be the right or the left. And there's just so much menace in doing it quietly, so matter-of-factly, that it instantly won in the role. And when you see the film, you're like, that was some scary shit.
Yeah. And not only that, the way he delivers his lines,
Mm-hmm.
There aren't a lot of people like this, but I could probably listen to Morgan Freeman read the phone book and go to sleep happy listening to it.
Well,
so
even,
it's like
even
It's
as
one of
good.
those voices. For
Yeah.
sure.
It's funny. He said in an interview, like once his voice became famous, like he said, friends were telling him, like, it's only a matter of time before you play God with that voice, right? He's like, yeah. But it's not just his vocal instrument, which is superb, but when the John Doe mentions like, oh, he didn't know about the child, and the look on Morgan's face just falls. And that whole ride out there to that climactic scene while Brad's like engaging John Doe and being a jerk and all that, you keep catching Morgan in profile just looking. He's studying, he's reading, and this concern keeps building because he knows like this guy isn't taking us out here for nothing. He's waiting for that other shoe to drop, and you can read it in his body language and his expression, and that's just how good he is. Like every movement means something with this man.
Well, I will say as a writer, or if I was an acting teacher, I would have people study the performance at the very end, just for the facial expressions and the body language. Because as a writer, if I was writing this, I would write all of the internal dialogue that is going on in Morgan Freeman's head. So if I was writing a novelization of this, through his body language and his facial expressions, the viewer gets all of that. They know exactly what he's thinking.
Now, would you write that for the actor as well? Like this is what's going through your head, so he can act that out.
If I was writing the script, I would,
Yeah.
or more likely than not, if it wasn't in there, I'm sure that a great actor like Morgan Freeman would come up and go.
I'm sure. I was just wondering, as a writer yourself, if you got to write the script, if you would have put that in there, like here's what's going through your head.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably do that even like if I was writing a comic script, because I want. The artist, if possible, to be able to convey that in the face of the emotions and stuff like that. So, but that's really a writing thing. But to get back to Morgan Freeman, you could see it in his acting performance, and I think it's masterclass. So, really impressive.
Yeah.
So, with that, we've gone a little bit long. I don't want to take you guys up forever. Plus, I'm feeling my back's getting tired and everything, so getting ready to get some dinner here and hop on out of here. But I do want to go around the horn on any final thoughts on the movie. Anything you want to add in about this movie before we sign off for this episode of Halloween Movie Madness? And once again, our guests go first. So, Mike, what do you think? Any final thoughts?
Final thoughts on the movie. I suppose I want to mention that Se7en itself was a huge influence on my story for Blood World. The whole. I mean, even some of the characters and their appearances and some of their characteristics, all taken from characters in that movie. It really had a huge influence on me as a writer. Like when I think noir, really, my first thought is Se7en.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, check that out. Ring Cross Breast Blood World. Yeah, we'll do a little self-promotion there. So, Jeff, what about you? Any final thoughts on this movie?
I would like to, I guess I'll comment on one thing we didn't really get around to is one other thing that really sets this aside as a noir or neo-noir as we get away from the time where noir was generated was even though there's plenty of scenes that are brightly lit and particularly setting the mood for safe spaces like Brad's home with his wife and things like that, and the orderly function of the police station, you do get like the heavy noir and in this case horror elements in the lighting for the crime scenes. They take particular care to give you that real kind of 1940s feel mixed in with like almost some 1970s kind of grindhouse kind of look, and it's very effective. The lighting, the shadow, the chiaroscuro, it's all beautifully done.
Absolutely. Steve, final thoughts on this movie?
Well, this movie put David Fincher back on the map after Alien 3. I mean, Alien 3 hurt his career from quite a few years. And then this movie came out, and this is what ended up making him a big director. And deservedly so, because the way that this movie is shot is absolutely amazing. I think it's atmospheric. I think it is a great exploration of the human condition, the darkness of the human soul and how far it'll go. Basically, and how do you exist in a world which is contaminated by sin? How do you go through that every day? And I feel like Somerset is really in many ways an inspirational character and a very well developed character. And the fact that that he can see what how bad the world has gotten, and yet after all of this and after everything that happened to his partner and this woman that he had grown to like, that he can still say, okay, it is worth fighting for, despite all the things that I've lost. I mean, says a lot for his character going forward. I mean, even though nobody really comes out of this movie intact, as Jeff has pointed out.
Absolutely. I'm going to end on a little, business-related note. I thought this was really interesting with Exorcist last time, and I think it's something I kind of want to do going forward, especially for older movies. This movie was released at the end of September, it's September 22nd to be precise, exactly. Which is not a great movie release date as a general rule. And it was made for $30 million in 1994, released in 1995. This movie, rated R, horror movie, not great money makers as a general rule, made for $30 million. It made $337 million worldwide, which is $637 million in today's dollars. So it did very well. So, once again, it's just kind of thing I like to point out that it's hard to put movies in perspective. Now, let's be perfectly honest, an average movie, if it's got the right genre, can make $1 billion, Here we're looking at a rated R movie, and those movies are usually hard to rake up the money. And it did very well for a horror movie and a bad release date. So I think that says something as well for how much of a phenomenon this movie was back in 1995 and how much people wanted to go see it. So good stuff. So I want to thank you guys. This was great. Another episode of Halloween Movie Madness. Next week, we're going to do Psycho. So I'm not sure if are you going to be able to be on that one, Mike? Or
oh yeah, I'm going to make it.
Cool, awesome,
nice,
so
excellent.
We will be covering Psycho, really the forefather of the modern slasher film. So we're going to be talking about that, a little Alfred Hitchcock. So, but I want to thank our guest first of all. Thank you so much, Mike, for joining us. I think
thanks for having me.
It was great having you on here. It was great back and forth discussion. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jeff. It's always good to see your smiley, happy face.
Yes, indeed.
Happy.
I was talking about the one up. I was talking about Mr. Happy, but we would like to see.
Oh, I thought you were talking about. Never mind.
We don't talk about that on camera while we're going crowd. Come on.
The first
we're a family show.
Yeah. The first rule of Cinema Crusaders is we don't talk about Cinema Crusaders after dark. So
I'm going to bring up Lance's hair again to distract.
Yeah.
Give me a head with hair, long flowing hair.
Oh, that could be taken the wrong way too. Anyway, Thank you so much. All right, we're going to get canceled now.
You're the one who brought it back.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve. Please don't talk about your hair or anything else. Just thank you so much for being here.
I don't have much hair to talk about, but no, it was good to discuss this movie. I mean, this is one of those movies that I hadn't gotten to in quite a few years, and coming back and seeing it now, I can really appreciate this movie and David Fincher as the director, and really this whole cast. And I'm looking forward to tackling Psycho next week, hopefully, because Alfred Hitchcock is my great favorite director of all time. So I'm looking forward to that.
Hell yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so everybody remember, next week is Psycho. The week after that is going to be In the Mouth of Madness. And then we are going to book in this whole thing the first week of November. So you're getting an extra week of Halloween. We're going to be doing The Exorcist 3. So we're going to be doing that. So with that, I will say to all of you, thank you so much for being with us, watching Halloween Movie Madness at Cinema Crusaders. Until next time, at the late night double feature picture show, Cinema Crusaders, and on behalf of all your hosts, we say thank you, everybody.
Double feature.
And we'll see you all next time on Cinema Crusaders. Bye-bye, everybody. And wait for us in Antissa. Patient.